Sherlock Holmes sat in his familiar chair at 221B Baker Street, the dim light of the gas lamps flickering through the windows of his study. The room, as always, was cluttered with an array of oddities that reflected the brilliant yet chaotic nature of his work: stacks of newspapers, ancient tomes on obscure sciences, and intricate devices he had constructed to further his investigations. Watson, his faithful companion, sat nearby, his steady gaze observing Holmes as he scribbled away in his ever-present notebook. Holmes had been quiet for some time now, as if he were lost in thought. The thrill of a new case had been absent for months, leaving the great detective to rattle through trivial matters that barely stimulated his mind. He longed for a challenge, a real puzzle to unravel, one that would require all of his intellect. It was then that a letter caught his eye. It sat untouched on the mantelpiece. The parchment was thick, and its seal bore a crest that immediately drew Holmes's attention. He had seen that insignia before, but not in recent years. It was the emblem of a powerful, influential family in London, one that held sway over politics and society alike. The letter was from an unknown source, but Holmes knew the moment he picked it up that this was no ordinary case. The contents, scrawled in a flowing hand, were simple but cryptic. "I require your services. Come quickly. What you seek will be the ultimate challenge." There was no name, no further explanation, only a vague promise of a mystery that was as elusive as it was tantalizing. Holmes looked at Watson, his eyes gleaming with the fire of a new investigation. "Watson," he said, his voice a quiet thrill, "prepare yourself for an evening of intrigue. We have an invitation from a mysterious source, and I intend to accept it." Together they made their way to the address listed in the letter, a sprawling mansion located on the outskirts of London. The building, shrouded in fog, seemed to be watching them as they approached. It was an imposing structure, the kind of place that screamed of old money and hidden secrets. Holmes was familiar with the Grayson family, but knew very little about the personal lives of its members. Lord Grayson, the patriarch of the family, was a powerful man, but his life was guarded with the utmost secrecy, even by the standards of the elite. He had lived in the mansion for decades, but only a few knew the real details of his dealings. Holmes was intrigued, and his mind already spun with possibilities. When they arrived, it was not Lord Grayson who greeted them at the door, but his wife, Lady Eleanor. She was a striking woman, tall and elegant, her dark hair pulled back tightly, her pale face betraying a subtle tension. There was an unmistakable air of distress about her as she ushered them inside, the vast halls of the mansion echoing their footsteps. They were led to a grand sitting room, decorated with exquisite furniture and heavy drapery. As they settled, Lady Eleanor wasted no time in explaining the purpose of their visit. "Lord Grayson is missing," she said, her voice steady but tinged with unease. "He has been gone for 3 days now. He left for a private meeting, and no one has seen him since. I fear something may have happened to him." Holmes, ever the observer, noted the way Lady Eleanor's hands trembled ever so slightly as she spoke. It was a subtle movement, but it didn't escape his notice. The worry was genuine, but so was the underlying calculation. He pressed her for more details, asking about the circumstances surrounding her husband's disappearance. Where had he gone? Who had he been meeting? Was there any sign of foul play? Her answers were vague, each one filled with frustration and confusion. She couldn't provide specifics. All she knew was that he had left in a hurry, as if he had anticipated something dangerous was coming. There had been no word from him since, and the household had been left in chaos. Lady Eleanor's distress seemed to deepen with every passing minute. Holmes could see the strain in her face, but there was something else beneath it. A subtle hint that there was more to the story than she was letting on. "I fear my husband's involvement in something dangerous," she continued, her eyes flickering toward the window as if expecting someone to appear in the shadows. He was always secretive, but in recent months, I noticed strange behaviors, cryptic conversations. I believe someone is after him. Holmes took in the information, but he remained silent for a long moment, his mind working rapidly. There were too many loose ends, too many unanswered questions. But one thing was certain. Something was amiss, and Lady Eleanor knew more than she was letting on. Over the next several days, Holmes and Watson conducted their investigation with all the precision and thoroughness for which the great detective was known. They scoured the mansion from top to bottom, searching for any clues that might explain Lord Grayson's disappearance. What they uncovered was troubling. Hidden letters, coded messages, and a series of contacts that Grayson had been meeting in secret. The deeper they dug, the more Holmes became convinced that Lord Grayson had found himself entangled in something far darker and more dangerous than simple business dealings. These were not just mysterious contacts. They were linked to a shadowy criminal organization known only as the Veil. It was an elusive network of powerful individuals involved in a variety of illicit activities, from extortion to assassination. No one had ever been able to infiltrate it, and those who had tried had paid the price. Holmes, ever confident in his ability to connect the dots, was sure now that Grayson's disappearance was no accident. It was part of something much larger, something carefully planned. But as he and Watson continued their search, the investigation took a darker turn. It became clear that someone was watching them, tailing their every move. The closer Holmes got to the truth, the more dangerous it became. Late one evening, just as Holmes was poring over the final pieces of the puzzle, a cryptic message arrived. It was written in code, one that only he could decipher. It was a warning. You are closer than you think. Back off or face the consequences. Holmes was undeterred. He could feel that he was on the verge of